What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Shonda, the culture psychologist, and you are now watching the Paging Dr. Shonda channel. Listen, we got some things to get into today. I want to dig into Taraji P. Henson, her discussing pay inequity, especially amongst Black actors and actresses, and also how people are kind of paralleling this to MoNique's message that she had talked about 5 years ago. And what was the difference in responses? Does colorism play a role? Does desirability play a role? So we're going to hop into that. Make sure that you guys like the video as the intro plays.
I am paging Dr. Shonda.
I am the doctor.
And I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Welcome to the Paging Dr. Shonda podcast, all things related to the Black culture.
The doctor in front of your name.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning in to yet another episode. Listen, we got some things to get into today. I have been meaning to get on this topic as soon as it broke because one of the things that passed through my mind when this was going on with Taraji P. Henson, she's currently on a press tour, is, didn't MoNique say this a couple years ago? So we witnessed two different responses from both actresses and from people who have been witnessing their statements, who've been listening to their statements. So we're going to hop into that. So if you've been living under a rock, you probably should be up to date on some of the things that we're going to discuss. So apparently Taraji P. Henson, she is currently on a press tour along with other actresses such as Danielle Brooks and Fantasia and Oprah. And if y'all haven't seen Color Purple yet, I advise you to get into it and make sure that you guys watch the deep dive that I did on the psychology of Color Purple. But all in all, they are currently on a press tour. And so on the press tour, as you guys saw the viral clip, Miss Taraji P. Henson just eloquently spoke about the emotions that she's experiencing related to acting and how the wages that she's being paid is not fair in comparison to what other actresses might be getting who have been in the game about the same amount of years as she has, who are not Black, right? Her non-Black counterparts. And so a lot of people had mixed responses. People are really looking to like advocate for this, like what else can we be doing? Like I've heard podcasters talk about like, okay, how can we change this, because this is not right. Like she's been in so many things, she's like a household name or whatever, so like how can we kind of make change? Other people who I feel as though like if you have a different perspective in terms of like, well, it's more money than I make or whatever, it's because you clearly don't understand like how this works, right? So if you're talking about, and someone brought up a good example on, I think it was Facebook, somebody posted like a lot of y'all are saying that like, well, she makes more than the average American, so she should be satisfied. But imagine going to work and recognizing and learning that like your coworker who does the same amount of work as you, who has been in the game the same amount of years as you, is getting paid more, right? That is the feeling, the experience that Taraji P. Henson expressed, right? So we're not talking about somebody who's working at, UPS or like any other blue collar type of jobs, and there's nothing wrong with those jobs, but we're saying with someone at that level who have been having roles as the roles that she's had, like leading roles, supporting roles, like Benjamin Button, like so many different things. Like she's saying she should be paid more because she was paid, for instance, a fraction of what Brad Pitt made in Benjamin Button, right? So that's basically what she's saying. Against she's been getting mixed responses, but I think all in all, people are willing to hear her. People mostly I've been hearing more so supportive messages and strong likelihood like people are going to continue to rally behind Taraji P. Henson. I think she will definitely get more roles like after this. Like I don't think that her brand is tarnished. I think that she did what she said what needed to be said. Like the people need to know, like, listen, this is unfair. This is how Black women are being paid in this profession, and this is not right. So salute to her. I think she did a great thing. The problem with this conversation is somebody pointed out, a few people pointed out that MoNique actually said the same thing about 5 years ago, right? And so if we remember, there was a different type of response that we received with MoNique, that we witnessed with MoNique, right? So many people labeled MoNique as difficult to work with. I did not see that with Taraji P. Henson. Many people have said that she's been blackballed, right? She's been allegedly blackballed from Hollywood or Black Hollywood, or however you would define it. And if you would, like if we want to think about it, like we really haven't seen MoNique acting in any major roles since that, right? So like anything like significant, like a Precious, right? Granted, she's still a great actress. Her acting skills have not changed. She has not, like her skills are amazing. She's still a great actress. But why was there such a difference in the way in which the message was received? And why was it such a difference in the way in which people responded to these two different actresses who were saying the same message? What was that difference, right? And so a part of my theory, I was just sitting back, like thinking, like, are we really analyzing how these two individuals, these two Black actresses, had the same message but are getting different responses? And a lot of that, I believe, is a result of appearance, right? So if we are really going to do an in-depth analysis of this, I think that we have to go into this recognizing things that Black women experience because of the intersectionality of oppression. We experience things related to tone policing, right? So that, and for those of you who might not know what tone policing is basically when, especially like a Black woman, we're communicating something, we're allowing our needs to be heard, expectations to be made or whatever, but instead of focusing in and honing in on the things that we're saying, our tone is often policed. Like, you need to be quieter, or I understand what you're saying about racism, I understand what you're saying about pay inequity, but you could have said that differently. That's tone policing. And we also have to keep in mind, and I made a post about this on TikTok, and y'all asked me to do a whole podcast on it. I haven't had a chance to record that yet, but it's coming. But I basically was talking about how oftentimes when we do say a message, and tone policing definitely plays a role, but the degree to which an individual is policed can often be mediated by desirability, colorism, and like fat phobia. Like, all those different things can impact the way in which we are policed as Black women. And so a part of the reason why I believe that MoNique received the backlash that she did when she said this same message 5 years ago is because of the desirability aspect, because of the fat phobia aspect, right? And even one can argue even the colorism aspect of it all, right? So if we're thinking about it, when we are talking about like an actress like MoNique, who I believe is beautiful, right? Both of these sisters are from MoNique is from Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland. Taraji is from DC. Like, they are sisters from like the East Coast. I would say they both from the DMV, but some people don't, associate Baltimore with being in the DMV, depending on who you ask. So I'm gonna just say they're amazing sisters from the East Coast. But they very much are like different women in terms of like how they look, right? And so again, they're both beautiful, but let's think about it. MoNique had a whole role in Hollywood with the Parkers where she was basically seen as the undesirable woman, right? She was always a good woman. Her character, she knew how to cook, she knew how to cater to her man or whatever, but they constantly talked about her weight, fat phobia. They constantly, she was the one chasing around Professor Ogilvy, like, hey, Professor Ogilvy, like that was her, like that role was her. She was often seen as the one who was undesirable, right? So when Black women, when we make these statements, when we are upset about something, we want our needs to be heard, our expectations to be voiced, and they're met with things like colorism, and met with fat phobia, and met with, again, like desirability, and we don't have features that are more closely aligned with European standards of beauty, then yes, we are going to be more policed. We might be seen as being more problematic, difficult to work with, essentially leading to blackball, i.e. MoNique, right? And I don't think that we saw that same type of backlash with Miss Taraji P. Henson. And so that is my theory. And even if we want to kind of go further into it, right? So if we're talking about Miss Taraji brought up pay inequity, right? So thinking about pay inequity, because I'm a firm believer that racism literally is everywhere. Of course, there's different pay. The what we call the wage gap is relevant, right, amongst Black people and white people, right? So amongst Black America and white America, there is certainly a wage gap, right? So Black people tend to make less than white people because of, again, the wage gap. Even when we control for factors such as gender, right? So thinking about Black men or white men and like the Black population, they're going to make more. White women in comparison to the Black population, they're going to make more. So even if we think about like within group differences, right? So within the Black community, there are differences pertaining to pay inequity. So researchers have even discussed and studied how there is pay inequity when it comes to colorism. individuals of a lighter complexion are more likely to be paid more than individuals with a darker complexion or individuals who are deemed as less desirable, right? So there was even a study that looked at how the wage gap between white Americans and Black Americans, or the wage gap between lighter skinned Americans versus darker skinned Black Americans, is larger than the difference between Black Americans and white Americans. So it's larger. So colorism, racism, all these things definitely play a role. It plays a role within the group that we experience. Racism plays a role between the group, meaning Black against Black with white people. And also, like, we have to keep in mind how desirability plays a role. So as we are listening to these women, we are listening to these sisters, and just to kind of like go back to that research that I stated. So that is some research and knowledge that I learned from my sister, Dr. Sarah Webb, who was an amazing, I believe she's a sociologist, but she's actually going to be on the podcast in a few weeks. So you guys may want to tune into that, because we're going to talk about the pay differences amongst Black Americans and how colorism does play a role in that and the difference in that. So shout out to her. But yeah, so when we are listening to these Black sisters, when we are listening to their personal experiences, I encourage y'all to identify your own emotions that might come up with that, and your own thoughts and what's driving those thoughts. Could we be, again, like shaming someone because of desirability, or shaming them or feeling some type of way about them because of colorism? Are we policing their tone, right? And so I encourage all of us to kind of do the work, because we are all impacted by white supremacy. There is not a person under the sun who hasn't been impacted by it. So that's my take for today. I hope you guys learned something from it. I want to hear about what you guys think in the comments, because I'm open to all perspectives. And let me know what topics you guys want me to review next. So again, it's Dr. Shonda, the culture psychologist.